All right, we are live. Welcome everyone, and welcome to all of you watching. My name's Amanda, and I'm here representing One More Page tonight to launch our Cozy Mystery December event, which is perfect because we all need to be a little extra cozy right now. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to be here for too long. I'm just going to introduce our authors, and then I will dip right out of the way. But let's get started. I'm going to go in reverse order on our event bio sheet just to mix things up a little bit. So we're going to start with the lovely Maureen Clover. Maureen is the creator of the Rita Calabrese Culinary Cozy series, as well as a traditional mystery series featuring lawyer turned belly dancer Jean Pelletier. A former spy and middle school teacher, a totally normal combination of careers. She has a keen sense of adventure, is the mother of a toddler and a black lab, and enjoys testing recipes and speaking Italian. So welcome to Maureen, first of all. And then next up we have Becky Clark, a highly functioning chocoholic. Becky Clark in Denver is the seventh of 8 kids, which explains both her insatiable need for attention and her atrocious table manners. She likes to read funny books, so it felt natural to write them too, and she published her first novel in 2001 and is a sought-after speaker. So, Becky. And then next up, we have Amanda Flower, is the USA Today bestselling and Agatha Award-winning mystery author of over 25 novels, including the nationally bestselling Amish Candy Shop Mystery Series. I love the names of cozy mystery series. What a great combination of words for one thing. The Amish Matchmaker series and several series written under the name Isabella Allen. An organic farmer and former librarian, another totally normal combination of things. Amanda lives in Northern Ohio and can be found online at amandaflower.com. And then last but certainly not least, we have Libby Klein, who graduated Lower Cape May Regional High School sometime in the 80s. We won't go into any more details than that. Her classes revolved mostly around the culinary sciences and theater, with the occasional nap in chemistry. The cat is on the desk again. There she is. See how well this goes. She has worked as a stay-at-home mom, climbing the ladder up the ranks to the coveted position of grandma. She also dabbled in the position of vice president of a technology company, which mostly involves bossing other people around, making spreadsheets, and taking out the trash. A member of the Mystery Writers of America and Sisters in Crime, she writes from her Northern Virginia office while trying to keep her cat Figaro off the keyboard. Perhaps she can give me some tips. So welcome to Libby, and welcome to all of our lovely authors for today.
Hi, we're so excited to be here.
Thanks everyone for joining.
I'm going to hop off, let you all do your thing, and see you in a little bit.
All right. Wow, this is very exciting. I hope everyone has a great time, and we're very appreciative to One More Page for hosting us. What we want to do is tell you all a little bit about ourselves and our series, and each one of us has a fabulous new release we want you to know about. So I'm Libby Klein. Hopefully you remember that from the intro. I write the Poppy McAllister mysteries. They're about a middle-aged plus-size widow who returns to her hometown of Cape May to face off against the high school bullies who tormented her. When one of the bullies ends up dead in front of Poppy's old locker, the other bully arrests her for the murder. So, Maureen, why don't you tell us a little bit about your series?
Sure. Well, thanks, Libby. By the way, I have read Libby's books, and they are fabulous. It's really fun, and we did a book tour together in Cape May, so I got to see where she's from. It was super fun. So I write the Rita Calabrese Garden to Table Italian-American Culinary Series, so there's a lot to unpack there, but it's cooking, it's gardening, it's lots of Italian things. It's set in the beautiful Hudson Valley of New York. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend it. The fall foliage is even better than Vermont. And it stars matriarch turned reporter Rita Calabrese, who uses her skills that she's developed, over a lifetime of keeping tabs on her slightly crazy family, to become a reporter and investigate and solve crimes in Acorn Hollow. And the Cozy Up with Kathy blog calls it all about food, family, and fun, which I think is the most concise summary I've gotten of the series. So my latest release, if you can see here, is of Mass and Murder. It's set during Carnevale, which is the Italian equivalent of Mardi Gras. So there's like fabulous food in it. And, you know, if you kind of think about like Carnivale in Venice, it's kind of like that, but in a little small Italian-American community in New York. But you think Rita, as an Italophile, would be in the holiday spirit. I'm trying to move this so it's not in front of my face. But she's in a funk because there's no crime to write about. She's a crime reporter. She's kind of stuck writing about the local Carnivale celebrations. There's an upcoming masquerade ball at her parish, St. Vincent's. Her editor says, well, there's nothing you can even write for the gardening section right now because nothing's blooming, but maybe you could do something about foraging and follow some hippies into the woods and learn about foraging. And the editor says, hopefully, and maybe you'll trip over a dead body in the woods. So that's kind of how it gets started. And then to make things even worse, normally she gives up chocolate for Lent so she can lose a little weight, but her daughter talks her into giving up meddling, which of course she insists she doesn't do. She just interferes, you know, well-intentionally in her children's lives. But her daughter says, well, stop meddling as your Lenten pledge. So that all seems like it's going to be a super boring Lent, but then her twin sister is blackmailed and wants help unmasking the blackmailer. And the biology teacher is poisoned during the Carnivale masked ball. And then when they go on the foraging expedition, the winery owner's glamorous fiance is poisoned by one of the foraged foods that they weren't supposed to eat and somehow got in her basket. And then on top of that, her husband's really shady cousin from Jersey shows up on her doorstep because his wife has decided she needs to be self-actualized and kicks him out. And so he's willing to barter his sleuthing skills for her help, like wooing back his estranged wife who's on this self-actualization journey. So it's all about Italian food, family drama, fun, hijinks, blackmail, foraging, and murder.
Hey, who knew blackmail and foraging were going to go together in a book?
I threw it all in there, and it was really fun to write.
You definitely did. I've read Maureen's first book, The Secret Poison Garden, and it was delightful. I really enjoyed, so much fun. Rita was such a crazy character to follow. I've also had the pleasure of reading Becky's book in her entire series, in her Mystery Writers series. Becky now has 2 series because she's just launched a really cool sounding second series. So can you tell us a little bit about each one?
Of course I can. So the Mystery Writers Mysteries is Fiction Can Be Murder. Fiction Can Be Murder and Foul Play on Words. And then I have a third one. The third one's going to be coming out, I hope in December, but maybe not till January, called Metaphor for Murder. In the Mystery Writers Mysteries, the protagonist is Charlie Russo, and she is a mystery writer herself. And she mysteries just fall into her lap. You know, she would really just rather write her stories than be a part of a story, and everything just seems to happen, and she can't quite understand why. In the first book, Fiction Can Be Murder, her agent gets murdered, and I gotta give a shout out to my agent, who was very, very cool with this premise. So, it's awesome. And then in Foul Play on Words, Charlie goes to a writers' conference where she's going to speak, and the organizer is a friend of hers, and the organizer's daughter gets kidnapped as soon as she gets there. So, so she's busy trying to find this adult daughter and help run the conference, and hijinks ensues. And then in the third one that's coming out, Metaphor for Murder, she is going to do this big author event for. Because she's out of money because all these, her agent's been killed. She's had all these problems. So her bank account is low. And so everybody tells her that she should do this event with this kind of hermit kind of author who gets on the train to come to Denver to do this event with her, but never gets off. And so she's stuck with all the bills for this event, and she's missing her author, and She doesn't know what to do, so she's got to get involved in this. So she really would just rather not. she really would rather eat grilled cheese sandwiches under the covers, but she can't. She steps up. Now in the new series, the crossword mysteries, this is the first one, Puzzling Inc. That series is a little bit different. It's still fun and funny and fast and fun. But Quinn Carr, the protagonist, she has been boomeranged back home. She's in her 30s because she had a recent kind of meltdown and was diagnosed with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So that sends her back home. She's in a depression. She is reeling from this diagnosis, doesn't really know what all it means and how to cope. So she takes a job in the local diner in their small town, and she's working alone one night, and she's trying to get everybody out so she can go home, and one of her last patrons for the night winds up dead, face down in his biscuits and gravy. So she not only has to deal with that and her OCD. Of course, she's 85% sure it's not her boss that killed the guy, but that's who gets thrown in jail. So she has to get him out of jail so that he can run the diner and she doesn't have to, because it's hard. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk a little bit more about the crossword part later, but that's basically that series. And there's 2 more of those coming out, one in May and one next year this time.
One of the things I really love about Becky's books is that her protagonists want absolutely nothing to do with self-defense. And I really appreciate that, because Poppy does not think I'm going to be a sleuth like it's some kind of a weird hobby. She is trying to get out of things. Every time something happens, she just wants nothing to do with it. And I just really love that about Becky's books also. Now, Amanda, your series is kind of new to me. I cannot wait to hear how this series came about and hear more about it.
So my book that came out today was Courting Can Be Killer.
Is it actually today? How exciting.
It's today.
Yeah, congratulations.
And it's the second book in the Amish Matchmaker Mysteries. And it's a spin-off of the Amish Candy Shop Mysteries that Amanda from the store had mentioned in the introduction. So Millie is a character in that series, and then she got her own individual series. So she's introduced in book 4 of that series, which is Toxic Toffee. And I think book 6 comes out April. I don't know. I should probably know that. And so it's about she's 67 years old. She's an Amish widow. She was widowed young, in her early 40s. And after her husband passed away, she kind of took on the job of being the matchmaker in the village, because she loves love and believes in people have one match. And she might be proven wrong with that in the future book, but she believes that, at least at the beginning of the series. So she helps young Amish couples find each other, which it can be a challenge within the Amish community, because you're related to a lot of the people so there's a lot of people that are off limits. So sometimes I live not far from Amish country, like within an hour's drive. So sometimes they'll bring people from other states, young men, young women, to visit in order for them to mingle and meet each other. So and then Millie, in a little bit of Toxic Toffee, she was peripherally involved with the murder mystery that was being solved by my sleuth in that series, who's Bailey King, who's a New York City chocolatier, not Amish at all. So maybe she got a little bit of the taste for sleuthing. And so in Matchmaking Can Be Murder, which is her first book by herself, she's solving the murder of a young couple that were together and one of them dies. So she was involved in the matching of them, and now half of the match is dead, so she feels responsible. So yep, and I don't know when I think the third one comes out next year sometime. I should really know this.
I never know.
I have a couple books coming out between for other publishers, so it's hard to keep my brain straight on all that stuff, but that's the gist of it.
I mean, those all sound so wonderful. We have some very unusual detectives. Our main character is also called a protagonist or a hero, or in our case, I guess, a heroine. They're not the typical cozy mystery heroines. Amanda's is an Amish widow. Becky's are a hot mess. And Maureen's is a mama in her 60s, starting a new career. Whereas my Poppy is, I think I broke a lot of stereotypes with her because she is in her 40s. She's a widow. She's plus size. And the first part of her life, she made some mistakes that then followed her through the next 20 years and changed the course of her life to where all the things that she had planned for herself just fell through the cracks. So when we come into class reunions, her husband has passed away. So she's a widow. She's not a super young widow, but nobody expects to be widowed at 40. And she's in a bit of a funk. There's a bit of a depression, like you would imagine. She has no skills for a job. She used to work at her husband's law firm as a receptionist. And now her best friend in Kate May wants her to come home and go to the high school reunion with her because her ex-husband is going to be there flaunting a new floozy, and the cheerleaders are going to be there in full force. So Poppy takes her black smoke Persian, Sir Figaro Newton, who's very naughty, and she takes the ferry over to Cape May to stay with her great aunt Ginny in her Victorian house. And it's falling apart, and Aunt Ginny is being investigated by social services, and it's just so much more than she planned on. But she's got a razor sharp wit, and she's very sarcastic, and the more pressure that's put on Poppy, the more sarcasm comes out. And one of the things that I really like about Poppy and about the series is that there's a very obvious growth. There's a character arc in the first book, but there's also a character arc in the series where she starts out feeling kind of helpless and just wanting to lay on the couch and be with her good friends, Marie Callender and Ben and Jerry, and watch the cooking channel. And that's all she has the energy to do. But as class reunions or murder progresses, she really has to pull herself up with the help of Aunt Ginny and Sawyer, her best friend, and sort of get her act together and fight back. So it's something that I'm very excited about, some of the things that I got to do with her as a character, and not just in the first book, but there's a lot that has been planned through the course of the series. So no one stays the same in my books. Everyone has growth and change. It might be good change. It might be bad change. But that was something that was very important to me. I didn't want you to pick up the 10th book in my series, God willing, there will be a 10th book, and say, you know, Libby's books are always just a different mystery, but everything else is identical. They just interchangeable. I want you to be able to pick up my books and say, there has been such a change in these characters over time. So that is my Poppy, and I just love her, and I've got so much more to say about the other characters because they make writing so much fun. But first, I really want to hear about Maureen's Rita Calabrese because I can identify with Rita. I have grown children who are not watching this right now, I hope, because I'm about to say something. And there's this moment where Rita is just had it. They don't appreciate me. I raised them right and they did not turn out the way that I wanted them to turn out. And she's just kind of irked about the whole motherhood thing. And I just see her sit at the table and I'm like, I have so been there. So tell us more about Rita, her journey, how you came up with her, Maureen.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Libby. So the first book is The Secret Poison Garden. And yeah, Libby there was a little spoiler there, but it starts with her kind of being not in a great place. Her kids, she's been a homemaker her whole life, an amazing cook, the church lady, the volunteer, and they've grown up, except for one failure to launch kid, but he's in community college, whatever, living at home. And her oldest son, who she adores, who's kind of a mama's boy, is getting married to a girl who's not at all like his mother. And she's like, haven't you ever heard the saying, you should marry a woman like your mother? And it's almost like insulting that she's so different. And then, she overhears her grown daughter say something like, mom's always been a housewife. She's never had a career. Like, don't listen to what she says. And that's just like the galvanizing moment where she's like, well, I'm going to go out and do something amazing that I always wanted to do, and become a reporter. And, she's this amazing volunteer. So she's always written articles in the Italian language newsletter in her parish. So she very creatively translates them to seem like way more like exposés than they really are. And of course, the editor of the Morris County Gazette doesn't know Italian, so she doesn't know the difference. So she hires her as a crime reporter. And then, very conveniently soon after that, the town football coach is murdered. So she becomes a sleuth very quickly after being a reporter. But she's someone who's got a huge heart, but sometimes can be really overwhelming, a little bit meddlesome, kind of domineering. But she's always meddling in a well-intentioned way, sometimes with really humorous results. She's an Italophile, so kind of like Poirot, says a few things in French. She kind of sprinkles her conversation with Italian, and of course she cooks a ton. So that's kind of how her journey starts. So that's the first book, The Secret Poison Garden. But each book kind of peels away more layers and shows sort of her rich interior life of this woman who's really the pillar of her community. She's wise, she's smart, she's sassy, she's able to draw on all this lifetime of experience, and she's in her mid-60s to solve crimes. But she is also a little bit vulnerable and afraid that her children don't need her as much as she needs them. So that creates sometimes some conflict. And that kind of comes to a head in this most recent book of Mass and Murder, where she has to supposedly give up meddling, and it really changes her relationship with her daughter in the end for the better. So that's kind of fun to see. So Becky, you want to tell us about sorry, go ahead.
I just love that they wanted her to give up meddling for Lent. That's hilarious.
Well, I was writing something about Carnivale, and I'm going to talk more about that later. And I was like, well, her Catholic identity is a big part of her. So I was like, so what would she be doing? It's like, well, leading up to Ash Wednesday, people will be giving things up for Lent. I was thinking about my parents too. And like one year my dad gave up ice cream, and it was really funny. Like by the end, my mom was begging him to break his promise because he gets really cranky when he doesn't have ice cream. And he was so cranky. My mom was like, just go back to eating ice cream. And she's the one who's a former nun. So you'd think she'd take it seriously, but she was just like, God will understand, eat ice cream, whatever.
The price is too high. Sorry, Miss Eliza's now knocking things off the counter, creating a ruckus right next to me. I'm sorry. So Becky.
Yeah. Becky,
you were going to share about Charlie and Quinn?
Yeah. Like I said, Quinn has been diagnosed with OCD. And it did kind of, it was fun to write about her in a weird sort of way. I don't have OCD, but I know some people who do, and I interviewed a bunch of people, and I was lucky enough to stumble on a whole bunch of first-person accounts about obsessive compulsive disorder, and it was quite fascinating and taught me a lot. The thing about OCD is that there's a million different ways you can be OCD, but OCD is it's an anxiety disorder. So no matter how your OCD manifests, it synthesizes down to an anxiety disorder. And so most of that looks and feels the same to people. So I was able to take all that stuff from the people that I heard about from, the first person accounts, and transfer that to Quinn. And so even though her OCD manifests as organizational disorders, she likes things color coded and in straight rows, and that's why she makes crossword puzzles. That's creating a crossword puzzle is very appealing to her. She didn't realize it until she was long into her adulthood, but so that's how she manifests, as organizational kind of problems. And it's quite fascinating. And with Quinn, I'm not out to make a statement or anything. I mean, my books are fun and light and cozy. But I think that Quinn, with her OCD, isn't any different than, somebody who has, diabetes, or, is hard of hearing in one ear, or has a wonky knee, or, is tragically gluten-free or something. It's just the baggage that we all carry. And some of our baggage is big and some is small, some's heavy, some's light. And Quinn's just happens to involve OCD. So I just wanted to just, write about a real person, somebody who's just going through life, doing her thing with baggage, which every one of us carry. So that's kind of Quinn. That's how Quinn kind of came to be. Charlie Russo.
Wait, you're saying that if we color code things and line things up and like putting books in alphabetical order, that makes us OCD?
No, and in fact, early on in the book, I did make sure, because I heard this from almost everybody I talked to and read about. Just because you like your spices alphabetized, just because you like your towels folded a certain way, just because you like things color-coded and you like your 3-ring binders, I do all that. That is me. I just described myself. That's not OCD. That's just being persnickety or making sure that your towels fit on the shelf or whatever. The other component of OCD is that it creates in you an overwhelming sense that you can't leave the house or something if your towels aren't folded right, or that if you use the wrong color in your color coding, somebody's going to die. Or, I mean, there's just this ramped up catastrophizing piece to that, and that's the anxiety part of it. So, and early on, because people don't like that joke where you say, oh, I'm so OCD because I fold my towels a certain way. They don't like that joke. People who actually have OCD, that's not funny to them. And so early on, I made sure that Quinn and her boss at the diner, Jake, they have that conversation, because he says, oh, I must be OCD too. And she's like, no, let's nip this in the bud right away. And people, the people that do have OCD have told me they really appreciate that part of it. So I'm glad I put that in there early on too. In the Mystery Writers Mysteries with Charlie Russo, who is a mystery writer, she, like Libby said, she is a reluctant hero, and I do write a lot about reluctant heroes. And Charlie came to be because I was reading this thriller with this kick-ass heroine who was doing all this great stuff, and as I'm reading, I'm thinking, oh my God, I could never do that. I would die. I would just curl up and puddle of butter, and that would be done. So I thought, well, what would I do? And I would be the one eating the grilled cheese under the covers, And so that's kind of how Charlie was born, kind of an extension of what would I do if I stumbled on this dead body or whatever. So that's how Charlie came to be.
And Amanda, what about Millie? Is there anything, I know you said you're not Amish, but you live near Amish country. Is there anything autobiographical, or what inspired this? Have you talked to Amish people about your portrayal?
So what really inspired Millie was Kensington asked for another Amish series. If you do, if your series does okay, they want another one, which is always what we want, right? To have another series. And I was like, oh no, this would be like my 5th Amish mystery series. And the thought of making up another Amish village, which every Amish village has like a tea shop and a carpenter, and to think of how am I going to make it different from the ones before. So I asked them, can it be in the same town? I promised to make the protagonist as different as possible, but just not to have to make up all of the periphery, all of the setting again.
That's very clever of you, Amanda.
And they said yes. So Millie came to be because I had to get as far away from Bailey King from the Amish candy shop, who's a late 20-something New York City chocolatier that ends up in Amish country taking care of her grandparents' candy shop. But she didn't grow up Amish. She grew up in Connecticut. So Millie's completely different. She grew up Amish. She's older, she's 67, and I thought that was really fun to write because so many of, first particularly Cozy Mysteries, our readers, if we look at the demographics, they're like 40 and up. So, you want to know that you could be out there solving crimes. Like, I'm over 40 now, so I feel spunky still. I could do stuff. So I wanted to age her up for that reason, because I think the readers would like it. And then I made her a widow because, being Amish, if she were still married, it would be really difficult to have her running around solving crimes, just because of how their culture is situated, that the wife stays home and takes care of the home. She wouldn't have that liberty that she does as a widow to run around and chase bad guys. So, so that's kind of how she came to be. It was just to get away from Bailey as much as possible, and then give her some ability to move in the community without restrictions. So that's how it happened.
Cool. Well, we're gonna pivot, but stay with Amanda on and talk a little bit about sidekicks. So you said, she's older, she's Amish, but her best friend is Lois Henry, who's non-Amish. She's been married 4 times. She loves to gamble. She's got this purple red hair. So how did you get them together, and why did you choose a sidekick like that?
Well, again, I chose a sidekick for practicality reasons. So Millie can't drive because she's Amish. And if you're running around chasing killers, it's a lot harder, especially in Amish country. The distances between places is very far. So it would take forever if she was like hopping in and out of a buggy. So she needed someone to be able to drive her around. And I love in my series to give my characters like a best friend to play off of. And usually in my series, the best friend is kind of, can be sometimes the straight man to my kooky character. But in this case, Millie is more, the Amish woman is more the straight, the more plain and quiet character. And Lois is my wild child. And so how they met, they grew up on the same street. So my series is set in Holmes County, Ohio, which is about an hour from where I live. And I used to work, I was a librarian for 15 years, and I was a librarian in an Amish community down in that area when I was very young. So that's my tie to the Amish, being a librarian in the community. And so they grew up on the same road, and they were best friends because Lois didn't have a great home life. Her parents were fighting all the time. People going in and out of the house. I don't really get into huge detail about it yet, what happened in her childhood. Maybe I will. I'm not sure. But it wasn't a great situation for a child. So she was always going over to Millie's house where there was a ton of kids, all Amish, and Millie's family was very welcoming and welcomed her in, and the 2 girls became best friends. as they grew older, they, went apart. Millie got married when she was like 18 to her Amish sweetheart, and Lois went off to Cleveland and went wild. But they both ended up back in their community in Holmes County and reconnected in their 60s. So they have this grounded friendship. And Lois is fun too, because she like carries the lock picks in her purse. So you have to have a friend that when you're a sleuth that does that sort of thing.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Okay, so Becky's sidekicks are not even human. So tell us why you made that choice and what the pros and cons are.
It wasn't really a choice I made. It happens. It's just one of those things, I guess, it's interesting because I don't really have sidekicks. I have kind of a large, secondary cast around both the protagonists, but not really any besties. I mean, when Quinn's in a depression, I mean, she is in no position to have a sidekick, So I did give Quinn a goldfish, who she has not killed yet, which is kind of remarkable because with Quinn's OCD, it's very, very hard for her. When you feed a goldfish and the flakes trickle down and they land in the bottom and the fish doesn't eat, so you don't know how much he's had and stuff. That's really, really hard for Quinn. And so she had to figure that out. And, but she's good to Fang, and Fang is a good listener, and she moves Fang around in his bowl. She puts him on the windowsill so he can see the world, and he moves him to the other parts of the house so that he can, it broadened his horizons, I guess. But yeah, all of my books have a lot of pets in them, dogs especially. In the Mystery Writers Mysteries, Peter O'Drool is a adorable, wheezy, fat little pug who lives with the upstairs neighbor. And actually, in the third book that's coming out soon, he gets dog napped, and it's all Charlie's fault. So even though she's trying to find the killer, she's also trying to find Peter O'Drool. So it's very, very stressful. Very stressful.
But a good motivator, kind of up the stakes. That's cool. Well, Libby has a non-human sidekick, Figaro, the black smoke Persian, who I think is inspired by Libby's own cat. And then she also has this great character, Aunt Ginny, who's, in her 80s, but she does things like star in Mamma Mia in one of the books. And she's just super feisty and wears purple because it's Tuesday or whatever. She's a really, really fun character. And she and Poppy help run a B&B together too. So that's kind of nice if it's your dream someday to own a B&B, you can vicariously live it through Aunt Ginny and Poppy. So tell us a little bit about Aunt Ginny and what inspired her.
Well, I think if you were to ask Poppy, Aunt Ginny is absolutely no help whatsoever in running this B&B. One of the first things she does is convince the guests that there's a ghost in the attic, and she charges them all for a ghost tour. There's no ghost. She's just, if there's a scheme, Aunt Ginny's going to come up with it. She is a lot of fun. She's based on my grandmother. And I have a good time writing her because it's sort of, my grandmother's been gone for a few years. So it's fun for me to walk down memory lane all the time. And anything I write with Aunt Ginny and the crazy things that she gets herself involved in are some of the easiest things that I write. Any hijinks is just going to come out of me because I see it so clearly happening in my head. So Aunt Ginny is in her 80s, and she runs with a wild pack of hooligans, and they go to salsa dancing and bingo and senior nights where they will run the shuffleboard, and they have a lot of fun, and they are living their life to the full. And that was something important to me was now I'm in the second half of my life, and I wanted to feel like it's just going to get better and better. And with Aunt Ginny and her friends, it is. So life isn't over at any age. just because you're of that age, that there's so much fun to have and so much life to live. And that's what Aunt Jenny and her girlfriends represent, is living life to your fullest at every age. And of course, Sir Figaro Newton is extremely naughty, and he is based off of my real cat, Sir Figaro Newton. Right now, I have the Miss Eliza Doolittle, she's naughtier than Figaro ever was, honestly. If she's not getting enough attention, she just starts walking down the counter and knocking things off. She just knocked a whole bag of cookies in the floor while I was here because I'm not paying attention to her. So she's very naughty. But there is one sidekick that I want to talk about in the book that came out today. Everything works the opposite than you think it's going to. So that's why people are like watching, like, what is their problem with these books? I'm not moving the way you think I am. But Wine Tastings Are Murder is my ode to Laverne and Shirley. This is what I call Sawyer's book. If you've read all of my books, you might have picked up that certain characters are highlighted, even though, it's a whole ensemble cast and everybody makes an appearance. Certain characters have sort of books where they really shine. And this is Sawyer's book. Poppy and Sawyer do a lot of the investigating together. In Wine Tastings Are Murder, a tour group comes through town and stays at one of the families stays at Poppy's bed and breakfast, and they go to an area winery where one of the tour group members dies at the winery. So Sawyer and Poppy are going all over town doing all the things that they're going to do, but they're doing them together, and it's always very Laverne and Shirley, very Lucy and Ethel. Nothing really goes smoothly. She's my Samwise Gamgee character, and she's always a faithful friend. And while Poppy is the straight man in the series and everyone else is kind of chaos around her, Sawyer is that if you want to ride over the cliff, I'm going with you. And so if you're a fan of Sawyer from the other books, you're really going to enjoy her in Wine Tastings.
Awesome. Sounds exciting, and congrats.
Thank you. So we've talked a lot about our sidekicks, right? Did anybody not talk about their sidekicks?
I don't think I talked about my sidekick yet.
Okay, because Libby has such a small attention span. She's already like, I don't remember. All right, Maureen, what you got?
Okay, so my sidekick is not Rita's best friend, although like Amanda's, I put him in partly for practical reasons, but then he just kind of grew. So my sidekick, well, there are a couple, but the one I want to talk about is her husband's cousin from New Jersey. He operates a dubiously legal vitamin shop where maybe they're selling steroids or something else on the side. He's like the black sheep of her husband's family. She's kind of embarrassed to even be seen with him. But the benefit of having a character like that is he gives her insights into the criminal underworld. He's got connections she doesn't have. She's from this very proper, kind of environment, so she doesn't really have all those insights. But deep down, he really has a heart of gold, and he provides a lot of comic relief because he's wildly inappropriate. I mean, he doesn't swear because it's a cozy and you're not allowed to swear, but he's makes wildly inappropriate, comments within the confines of a cozy. But sometimes he unwittingly gives her an idea because he's so just says it like it is, and then sometimes something clicks. And so, like I said, in Of Mass and Murder, he comes because his wife kicks him out. So that's really fun. And then she takes him on a road trip to do some sleuthing where the murder victim grew up. And it's super convenient that he's got tattoos because one of the murder victim's best friends is a tattoo removal artist. So, she convinces him he needs to get his tattoo removed so she can basically pump the best friend for information while he's getting that done. So he started as a small character and he's really grown. It's been a lot of fun. Cool. So I know we only have 15 minutes left, so maybe we can sort of combine a couple of these questions. Maybe we can talk a little bit about research.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about research. Maureen, I wanted to ask you about the whole foraging thing, because that is something I don't know anything about. Tell us about that a little bit.
I'm pretty sure I would kill my family if we were eating foraged foods.
Yeah. So it started with, the whole thing is when you start to write these mysteries, especially if it's a culinary, you're like, okay, well, what time of year is it? And since it's garden to table, it's like, well, what's in season in New York and all this stuff. And I want to write something in February, but I'm like, well, here's the problem. February, early March, there's nothing that grows. So what is she going to cook that's seasonal? And then I thought, oh, but you can forage things, even if they're not in the farmer's markets. So when I went to the Hudson Valley to do my research, I got this great book, Foraging New York, by this guy, Wild Man Steve Brill, who apparently became famous when he picked a dandelion in Central Park in 1969 and got arrested and handcuffed and put in jail because it was like illegal to pick flowers in the park or something. Now he leads these like foraging expeditions in the Hudson Valley that I've always wanted to go on. But unfortunately, like just as I was like planning the trip, COVID hit and I couldn't go. So I really relied a lot on his book and his website and kind of mapped out like what could she pick that first of all could be confused with a poisonous plant so someone could die, but might also be tasty so I could put some recipes in and would be growing at that time of year. So it's like this Venn diagram of all these different things. So I ended up with a couple things. I ended up with wild carrots, which look almost exactly like poisonous water hemlock, except the water hemlock has a mottled stem. And apparently it's so poisonous that just the amount in the tip of your thumb can kill someone. So it's like, great, it's super toxic. The murder victim doesn't need to ingest a lot and she'll die. So there was that. And then ramps, which a lot of foodies love, fiddlehead ferns, burdock, which I don't know if it's been in the news a little bit lately because the North Korean dictator was claiming that if people ate burdock in North Korea, they wouldn't get coronavirus, which isn't true, but people were growing burdock like crazy. And stinging nettles. So all these foods. And then I was like, well, how am I going to get them if I can't forage myself? So I found out the best way to get forage foods is on eBay. And so I ordered these foods on eBay from actual foragers, and they came in these like very sketchy cardboard unlabeled boxes with like twine around them. And there was kind of like dirt coming out, and they were like hand addressed. And I was thinking like, it's a good thing there's a pandemic because none of my neighbors are going outside. If they did go outside and they saw this package, they'd think I was totally a drug dealer because it looks like someone was sending me drug shipments. So I cooked with it. And this is one case where a lot of the recipes I tried didn't make the book because they honestly weren't that good. It's very hard to cook with forage foods. Like I tried to make a stinging nettle soup and it didn't really turn out. And I tried to do things with burdock. I still have burdock in my freezer actually, and it didn't turn out. So the one thing that's in my book that's a recipe at the end, so it's a recipe at the end of this book, it's very simple, is ramp butter, which foodies love. So it's basically just like, softened butter with ramps and some other herbs. And then you can actually freeze it. And then you can just cut off a bunch and use it on fish and stuff. So that was my foraging thing. But someday I still want to go on a foraging expedition with this wild man guy.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, it's really fun to research.
Amanda, what about the research for the candy stuff?
So researching candy is fun because you get to eat candy. But as far as researching the Amish community, like I said, I live very close. So I go down there all the time. And right now my husband and I, we have a farm, and we're building a house, and the Amish are building it. So they are coming to me to build this house. So that's how I can learn about them. And but for the Amish candy shop, there is a candy shop in Holmes County called Koblenz, and that's really what my shop is inspired by. So you can go online too and see what they have. So that's what I have.
Do the Amish people building your house know that you write an Amish series?
They do. So I don't know if every Amish person that's working on the house knows, but the main contractor that's in charge of the project knows, as well as the the draftsman that drew the house and everything. So they think it's funny. I don't think they are going to read my books. They're a bunch of like tough guys. It's not really my demographic that reads my books, but maybe their wives will. I don't know. Becky, your series has crossword puzzles. So how did you make that work and fit your crossword puzzling into the book series?
The Quinn has made the crossword puzzles in secret since she was in high school, and so that's just a job that she does for the local newspaper. And the chief of police loves to do the puzzle, and so she got the brilliant idea to put in subliminal clues into the puzzle for the chief to subliminally learn and investigate the way she thinks it should be done. So that's, and actually it seems kind of easy, kind of obvious, but it's really hard to write, to figure those out, to figure out how to merge it all and stuff. So I had to learn how to make my own puzzles. So that's been kind of complicated too. I noticed in the chat we have some questions. Do you guys want to answer those?
Yeah, but do we want to talk about Libby's research on gluten-free?
Yes,
recipes?
of course we do.
I mean, Libby lives her research. I have an autoimmune disease. I didn't have to interview anybody. I just know that I've read so many cozies with delicious recipes that I can't have. All those cookies and cakes and breads and things that you all put in your book just kill me to read about them and not try them. So because I'm gluten-free, I made Poppy, my protagonist, also gluten-free so that we could put recipes in the books for people who are allergy friendly. So that if you can't have gluten or dairy or something, when you read my books, I give you ways that you can make the food that Poppy makes so you don't have to be left out. So we do have some questions. So let's see. What are they, Becky, since you see them?
Yeah, Lily Ann says, if you could go back in time to one place in history, where would you go and would you change anything when you were there?
Okay, I would go to high school and I would say don't. That's what I would do. Guys.
Yeah, I feel like I need to think about it more to give a really good answer. But in the context of my books, the Hudson Valley was home to FDR, and there's some stuff about FDR in the third book, Murder in the Moonshine. And I was really fascinated when researching that he had a hot dog summit that apparently was a big scandal at the time. So the King and Queen of England came to visit FDR at his Hyde Park retreat. And, the Queen, you think like you got to be all formal and stuff. And he thought it would be super fun if he took her to like his summer house, which was only like 3 miles away on the hill, but like super informal, and served her hot dogs. And the press just went wild about that and said it was wildly inappropriate that he served her hot dogs. But she apparently liked them, so it was fine.
Well, she's a very polite lady, so I doubt that she would say, to his face anyway.
Right. I would
I know.
A knife and fork. And
You probably did. I think so. With some tea,
Yeah.
I don't know. What about you guys? What would you change? I mean, that's tough.
I wrote a kid's book, a series of fantasy kind of adventure romp things for middle readers, for kids. And basically it was a time travel thing, and it was just loads of fun to do. And I want to resurrect them someday. But my research into Shakespearean times was fun. And I know it was a terrible, terrible time to live. Everything smelled bad and everything tasted bad and everything was just crazy, crazy bad in many different ways. But I would love to go back there for a very short amount of time and see what that was really like. I don't know that I would change anything. They used to throw buckets of slop out of their upstairs windows, right into the street. I might change that because that's just nasty. They should know more about that, about the hygiene thing. But I think
we've talked about that. All the things that we think sound so great from 200 years ago, they did this and this. Yeah, and it sucks. That's why we don't do it now.
Right.
We change things because it was terrible.
Exactly.
How about you, Amanda? What would you go back and change?
Gosh, I don't know. I think I would have been interested in going back to I've always been fascinated like with the 1800s, so like mid 1800s, pre-Civil War. But I don't think I'd really want to go back then because it would be a hard time to live, very tense in the United States. But I think it's an interesting time period in our history. That's why I'm interested in it. But I'd want to go back and like be more of like a fly on the wall and like look and then like get out. Like I don't want to stay. And I don't want to have to dress like that either.
I mean, anytime you can go back and they didn't have running water, I'm like, nope, I'm out.
Yeah.
I would love to wear those old clothes though. You know, all those bazillion different layers of things. I think that'd be so much fun. Only once, you know. I don't want to do that every day, you know.
Well, I worked in a living history museum in college, so I can so a hot Midwest summer wearing petticoats. Yeah. I don't recommend.
I guess. Yeah. So I saw one other question. Have you based your characters on anyone you know in real life? And I'm going to take this one first because my mystery writers' mysteries, that is everybody I know who's in those books. If you know any writers, you will find them in my books because they are all fun and crazy and unfortunate in a million different ways. So, and they just have so much ability to write for them, you know, because they're just so crazy and fun. So yeah, I write all the time, people I know.
Yeah, my story, Rita's very vaguely based on a neighbor I had growing up who my husband and I call Mrs. Silver Fox because we went to her anniversary party and she talked about how her husband was the Silver Fox and she said it like 1,000 times and that he was still a college wade and all this stuff. Anyway, but she's like Rita in that she's all about her family. She's actually not Italian, although she looks Italian. She has big, bushy, black hair. She's very histrionic and over the top and just like obsessed with her family. Like when I was a little kid, she made her son take Mommy and Me cello when he was 3. And she was just like wanted her boys to be like mama's boys. And she cooked and she sang operatic arias like that I would hear through the window. She actually had a really good voice. Although one funny thing is, so my dad, who never reads anything except science fiction, has read my books, which impresses me. And he would call me up and he was like, so is Rita your mother? Really? And I hope she doesn't think that because, you know, some things are good, some things are bad, but not really. I don't know.
Most of my characters, most of them are based on people, but the people they're based on are almost all passed away. So I have Aunt Jenny as my grandmother. Some of the villains are based on real people. From me. But one of the more fun ones is that itty bitty Smitty, the handyman, is my stepfather. And one of the characters in Restaurant Weeks, one of the chefs, I can't say which one because that might make you start to think whether or not they did it, is my husband's uncle. So I've got different people that I know and I put their personalities or into the characters. So
is there a real life inspiration for Gia, the sexy Italian coffee shop owner?
I think G is a figment of my imagination, but when I find her, I will let you know. I'm looking.
Well, your husband better watch out then.
How about Amanda, real quick? Anybody based on real life for you?
Not, you know, they're more like pieces of people. So like I'll see someone and then I'll be like, oh, that's a weird quirk that person has, and I'll store it away in my brain. There's been so since we've been building our house, there's been a couple of the Amish workers that I've been like, oh, you're gonna be in a book. So I think they'll more so in future books because I'm, you know, spending more time with them and getting to know them through this process. So I think they're going to end up in books, and I don't really have to worry about them reading them.
Oh my goodness, Libby, that's such a cat.
She's
very Jenny. I figured she was fitting to conclude our cozy event. However, it is 1 minute for her dinner time, so she's gonna flee until it's time for that. I'm sorry we have to wrap up, but unfortunately, these people need to go to bed eventually. And I know we can keep you all here talking all night. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I'm going to pop the link to buy everyone's books in our chat one more time so that if you're watching in the comments, it'll be there. Anything you all ladies would like to say to wrap us up?
Well, I'll say that I'm local to One More Page. So if anybody buys anything tonight or, over the next couple of days from One More Page, I can sign it and personalize it. And anybody who
Never gets
buys
easier.
that I personalized from One More Page, I made my pairing wine, cheese, and figs magnet. So I'll
cute.
I'll include this with anything. And Maureen is also local.
Yeah, I live in Arlington where One More Page is. So yeah, I can sign them as well.
And I mean, I'm a big fan of all of these ladies. I love all of them, and I'm fascinated with Amanda's series, and I adore both Becky and Maureen's series. So, I think you should try them all out. You will not go wrong.
Well, I couldn't agree more.
Yes. So
and
much
they
fun.
make good gifts. If you're looking for holiday gifts,
It is getting to that season. I believe it's actually December now.
Well, and it's also going to be too cold to go outside season, which is the stay inside and read season. So,
Right.
Yeah, also known as a global pandemic season. What are you doing outside your house anyway? Get in there.
Get
inside. And I think a cozy fits perfectly in a stocking. If you got a little bit of stretch to your stocking, you don't need much, just a touch of give there. And all of these books are available, which is great because books that we have to order at this point are a lot harder to get because of timelines. These books are in the store, so we can get them for you right away. Just follow the links below. Well, thank you so much, ladies, and thank you everyone for watching, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.